Welcome to Soulful Practices podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Holling-Brooks, and over the past 20 years, I have been on a journey of healing and awakening. I'm also a coach and practitioner for clients on their journey of unbridling their true self. The number one question I'm asked is, what meditation or practice will help me reach my goals? While there is no one meditation or secret mantra that will unlock our own awakening, there is a doorway that will lead us there. And that's the doorway of learning and cultivating the skills of self-reflection and contemplation. Each episode of this podcast offers you pocket teachings and practices that you can implement right away to help you courageously connect with living your authentic soul-led life. Let's dive into this week's episode. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 21 of Soulful Practices. I'm your host, Michelle Holling-Brooks, and we are currently in season 2 of exploring different practices and ways in which we can cultivate and consciously set that intention to connect more with the soul medicines of love and compassion. You know, to me, these graces or medicines of the souls, as I like to call them, really allow us to step into freedom of choice. And one of the first quotes that we explored during this season in episode 15 was by a mystic Osho. And he invited us to release the way that fear makes us move and instead embrace and begin to cultivate the way in which love and joy invites us to move. And that's such a huge, it was a paradigm shift for me of really looking at what is driving the way I'm thinking, the way I'm seeing, the way I'm interacting, what is subconsciously the reason, quote, why I'm engaging in life and how I'm doing it. And I started to see that so many of the ways in which I was responding to life was from this protective mechanism of fear. And even the ways that I thought I was super empowered, as I slowed down and got really nuanced with it, I realized there were subtle ways of fear, like I need to be successful at this. I need to be productive. I need to, insert thing, yada, yada, yada. And even the way I was creating had subtle ingredients in the cake of it, so to speak, that were actually coming from fear, coming from a sense of needing to control, a need to predict, a need to way to protect myself. And I started to really say, what would it look like if I came through the door of love? And that's what we're exploring in this season. And like I said in the previous episode of episode 20, side note, if you're new to me, I kind of use everything like an ongoing course, like ongoing spiritual or wellness development, and just really allowing our system to be deeper and lean more into those conversations so that everything kind of builds, and yet it's also standalone. So it's a kind of fun way. But in episode 20, I started to talk about that concept of befriending our emotions, and you could put thoughts with it too. But if we let go of the fear that we're not trying to transcend different emotions. We're not trying to avoid different emotions. We're not trying to judge our emotions, whether they should be or shouldn't be, if I am balanced or unbalanced, if I'm healthy or well or spiritually evolved. These emotions should or should not be a part of my work. And instead, we just acknowledge that they are there. That then gives us a willingness to not be squeamish with them, to not have to write stories with them, right, wrong, or indifferent, good, bad, the ugly, and just be able to really, that not being squeamish translates into we're not either feeding them, like allowing them to get bigger and bigger and more like with the three-headed dog kind of a thing, but we're not also overly attaching to them. We're not saying this is me and this is all of me. So I can start to allow myself to not have a fear associated with this is a good emotion, this is a bad emotion, this is emotion I need to manage, this is the emotion I don't. We stop trying to manage it all, and we can find that sweet spot in the middle. That sweet spot where we're able to turn towards whatever happens to be floating through us, whatever those emotions are a messenger for. And when we are being asked and guided to be like, lean into this particular one, let's see what is there. What is it? Who is it a messenger for? We can bring love, compassion, and seeking that soul medicine or the grace of understanding. and to do what Pema Chodron said, take a good look, right, at who they're the messenger for, shake hands with that emotion. The charge then goes away in our system, and we can actually start to work with the part of us that raised its hand and said, excuse me, I have a question, I have a concern, I have a need, right? And we can start to sort between just the emotional waters and the true needs that our system is asking us to hone in on, right? So the practice that I gave you last week was this idea of really inviting ourselves into exploring. And first, because there's 4 stages of really inviting change into our system in a healthy, supportive way that doesn't try to tell it it's wrong and doesn't try to force it into a quick mindset hack or something like that, is step 1 will always start with that awareness, right? Like, what is happening? And then acceptance for the reason why it's doing what it's doing is because at some point that served. At some point that was the most exquisite thing that our system could come up with to help us meet the demands, the individual demands of that moment in time. Now the problem is once a program gets put in there, and especially if that program is reinforced by our environment, by the experiences in which we're swimming in at that time, it gets stuck. Our system's super efficient. It doesn't go back to be like, hey, let's defrag this thing and let's, update old systems and old ways of being. No, it's a frozen piece of time that now is blanketing across everything. And so much of any healing or wellness or spiritual growth journey is about pulling back that curtain in a loving way, having great respect. Take your shoes off on sacred ground that is you, and leaning in with that love and then compassion to starting to say, okay, what is happening here? So in that first episode, we worked on that awareness and that acceptance. Like, we're going to honor the way our system was taught to work with emotions, right? And that is like step 1. We have to be able to realize hey, even if right now, currently in this moment, I agree that emotions aren't the problem, there might be part of me that has a different program. And when I'm stressed, we default to our original factory settings of our experiences, the way in which we learned to keep ourselves safe, not the idealistic way, not the beautiful pie in the sky way. No, like boots on the ground. What did we have to do? And that is something that we were gaining insight into. So great, step 1 complete. If not, you might want to pause, go work with that one for a little bit, and then come back to this one. So in this one, we're going to work with step 2. Step 2 is what happens now that we've said, okay, I want to put a new system in. I want to have a new truth within my system of how I work with these things called emotions and thoughts and what they're the messenger for. That means that I'm going to be willing to turn towards the part of myself that whoever that emotion is asking me to shake hands with, right? With what? With hands on hips, telling it it's broken, it's wrong, it shouldn't be there, or coming in with what I like to call clean versions of love and compassion. And I deem this version of the messy, sticky wicky version and a clean version because it's just super easy to see that when we come at trying to help ourselves with stickiness, with needs, with I need you to do this in order for me to say I'm successful, or intermeshed with other things, it doesn't get very far. It's like trying to clean a floor with dirty water in a tub. Like, I might be doing the wax on, wax off, but if the water that I'm using is all grimy, gritty, and yucky, or the sponge, I'm not wringing it out and it just keeps the grunge on the bottom surface of that sponge, it doesn't matter how much effort I put into trying to have that floor look clean. It's going to be streaky. It's going to be a hot mess. And at the end of the day, I'm going to look at this huge floor that I've tried to clean and I'm going to be like, why isn't this working? It's because we need to refresh the source of how we turn towards ourselves, right? And so that means, are we willing to explore what is happening, right? What are the needs with me right now? And ultimately, I'm trusting that the medicine that I need to work with whatever that need is within me, within the wound. It's ultimately trusting that if I turn towards that part of me, it's going to show me how it wants to resolve itself, how to release that inner conflict, how to meet the questions or the concerns or the unmet needs in a healthy way so that it on its own releases. Right? And so we can keep telling it release, release, release. I have done that. And in my history, we can put something down, but what we're doing is just pushing it to the sides and not really allowing it to truly release. Where if we turn towards it and we work through the doorway that I'm talking about, then it actually unwinds itself and releases itself and comes, quote, home, right? And so we start to move from love and not fear. So I had to pick one teacher to kind of like work with this idea of letting go, work with this idea of like how if it's not me that lets it go and then it's stuck there and I'm like shaking my hand like get off, like trying to pull this thing off and it's like slingshotting right back to me is like how do we do both? How do we help our hand release its grip? And how then do we also help the piece that's desperately clinging to us, thinking that this is the way to survive? How do we help that one feel safe to start to soften and release and allow us to truly come into balance? And so this art of letting go, I have been talking about kind of from the very beginning of Soulful Practices. If you're in any of my other programs like Unbridled Soul or Connecting with Joy, which is our online membership community, I talk about it there. I'm going to talk about it everywhere because it's really this is the crux, right? This is helping our system let go of one pattern and step into one that's more healthy, more current time, and allows us to be in a beautiful relationship with ourselves. And when we can move from love and not fear, we don't have a grippy system. We don't have sticky Velcro-ness. We don't have like clinging on. Right now it's in the fall, and so there's all these little burrs and everything else like that, and I'm trying to get out of the horses, and the horses are just like walking through life, and these things are getting stuck to them, and they really don't like to like let go. Right there, the horse is like, I could care less about them. I personally don't want them in my world. And yet they're still there. So how do we help that process within ourselves? And so this subject is really core to any healing and growth path, this letting go. And the idea is that if we can figure out how to let go, take the burrs out of the system, that equals freedom to choose. And if we have freedom to choose, then that is, quote unquote, the only condition for happiness. And so the pocket teacher that wanted to come forward to help us work this formula is the one who came up with this formula in a beautiful way. He didn't come up with it, but he shared it and he teaches it in a beautiful way. And that is the late teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh. And Thich Nhat Hanh is a beautiful soul who really learned to embrace letting go and working with that process. And he has in his own personal history an immense amount of trauma history, both for himself and then culturally for the community that he came from, and how he helped himself heal and find an inner peace and balance, and then how he then opened that up to the world at large through his organization and Plum Village, and how he taught, quote, meditation. Now, he's a teacher in the Buddhist tradition, but to me, again, it transcends a specific tradition, and it opens up to just, this is the way to help ourselves feel a sense of balance, to really have a beacon of hope within ourselves, to have a pathway for healing, and to have that not only for ourselves, but out into the community, into the world in which we're interacting with. And right now we know that that ability to hold this healing presence, to stay centered, and when we're around and witnessing and supporting, working with an immense amount of trauma, that is something that is oh so needed right now in this world. So he said, letting go gives us freedom. And freedom is the only condition for happiness. I'm going to just pause right there before I go to the rest of it. Like, letting go gives us freedom. And freedom is the only, full stop, condition for happiness. for feeling that sense of joy, enjoyment in life, for feeling a sense of satisfaction and being content in a good way with what our life is and what we're experiencing. And if we go off of Sharon Salzberg's definition, who is another beautiful teacher in this space, of happiness, it's that ability, and that I have put with joy, is that ability for us to feel that we can resource ourselves, that we can find center, that we can support ourselves, we can lean in without getting squeamish, no matter what is happening in life's ups and downs. That is the definition of happiness. So it's not that my life needs to be perfect and I need to have all these checked boxes. I feel safe and secure. I feel that my bank account is safe and secure. I love my job. I love my family. Everything feels good. So therefore I equal happy? No, because that's conditional. And that's then not freedom, right? Because now we're gripping to something. And so this is what he goes on to say, that if in our heart we still cling to anything, anger, anxiety, or possessions, we cannot be free. So what I love about this quote is, just like Pema Chodron's quote from episode 20, he is saying that we will always have life experiences. We will always have moments like that we're going to feel angry or anxiety, and that we're going to have that full range of emotions available to us, moving through us, both connected to us and out to that collective. We're going to witness that, we're going to see it, and we can't take that out of the equation. And so if we can't take those things out of the equation, and having those experiences, then all of a sudden doesn't become the issue. And like Sharon says in her definition of happiness, when we feel that we have internally within us the ability to either resource inside of ourselves or be guided to the appropriate resources that are truly going to be helpful to us outside of ourselves, when we have those two things, even if one of them feels shaky, if we have that ability to balance ourselves, to resource ourselves inside and out, that is what allows us to feel a sense of happiness no matter what is happening in life. And what Thich Nhat Hanh is inviting us into, same as Pema Chodron, is that, hey, these experiences in life are not the conditions in which happiness grows. It's not the conditions in which we can access giving and receiving love. It's not the conditions in which we can access compassion for ourselves or for others. In fact, no matter what type of conditions we're in, if we have the ability to let go, it gives us the freedom, and freedom's the only condition of happiness, to not cling. And when we don't cling to whatever it is we're experiencing, then we can connect with what we choose. Happiness, love, joy, supporting ourselves, turning towards, without squeamishness, the parts of us that need help, and taking a good look, right? And so, it might be like, Michelle, you've already said this, and why do you keep saying this again? Because some parts of you, I'm not just talking to your mind, I'm talking to all the different parts of you. And I really am inviting them to feel that it's okay to have moments where we experience anger, fear, or possessions as enjoyment, right? It's okay, because there's this weird belief system that somehow if I become on the spiritual path and I allow myself to go mind, body, soul, like a mind, body, totally fine. I will work my health and my wellness goals from over here. I will work my career goals and my personal goals and all that good stuff from mind, body. But the minute we associate the true holistic fracture of mind, body, soul, we think all of a sudden that we have to give up our possessions. The universe is going to come for our housing security, or the things that we like and we enjoy, the chocolate, whatever. And we have to give that up, like there's even different traditions where we do abstain from allowing ourselves to connect to things that bring us pleasure. And that's supposed to bring us closer to gratitude and to God and to all these other things. And while I say that that helps us realize that we don't need that in our life, that we're not addicted to that thing, we can come through a different door. And this is the door that Thich Nhat Hanh is talking about, right? So we can deeply love the different things we have and the blessings that we have within our lives, the things, the houses, the friendship, the moments of connections, the celebration. And we don't have to fear that somehow me getting closer to my true self, inviting myself to partner with my soul through my health, through my well-being, through my finances, through the way I just work in everyday life, that somehow that's going to be like, we're going to be asked to give up all of that, or the universe is going to come and take it away. Like, that's not true. That is a huge myth. And unfortunately, it's a myth that's come through certain traditions out there that links those two together. And, I just want to give your system a, a release of that. And so what though is true is if we cling to them, if we say, this is how I feel safe and secure, this is how I allow myself to say that I'm worthy, this is how I know that I'm on the right track. If we cling to those different experiences, connections, or expressions of, quote, possessions in my life as a way in which I can measure my life, now, this is where we get tricky. That is where, my friends, the entrapment lies. That's where we go from being free to being enslaved and moving from fear instead of love. So when we cling, as he says in his quote, when we cling to things, we then, as we're going to explore throughout this whole episode, is we then take the different ways that we cling to, instead of letting go, we become like the little static thing of the burrs and the horses, right? That is really difficult to get on out of there, and it doesn't want to just slide on out. It's grippy and it wants to stay bound to something, to someone, and to even the emotions, as this is how I am stable. This is how I feel that I can hold on. This is how I feel I can meet life. And if this is removed, I can't do life. And then when we do that, again, we're not open to connecting with happiness, resourcing ourselves in appropriate, beautiful ways in the now moment. We're not able to be in true enjoyment because and some part of us is in fear. What if this is taken away? What if this isn't here? So even when we have our successes, it's not really allowing us to enjoy them fully. It's not allowing us to linger in the laughter. And it's also not allowing us to fully tend to ourselves in supportive ways in those moments where there is a wave of sorrow that needs to be held and witnessed, and the parts that are lost and hurt tended to, right? And so this, my friends, is what we're working on when we start to be free to connect with those inner states of happiness and joy, that we are no longer enslaved by the fear and by the attachments that we have to our emotions, to our thoughts, or to our possessions, and what that's going on. So when we go from being like that to being empowered, we all of a sudden can be and coming from the present moment. We don't have past emotions or fears dictating what we can connect with in this moment. And we don't have future fears or worries or expectations dictating to us what we can accept in this present moment. And that is when we are able to release the, quote, extra suffering that we generate when we're stuck in a push me, pull me with our life. Okay. So let's lean in and let's break this quote down a little bit more. And so letting go is freedom, and freedom is the only condition for happiness. That naturally brings forward a couple questions. What is happiness? We already kind of talked about that. What is freedom? And how do you let go? If you're saying, I've opened my hand and it's not going anywhere, Michelle, how do we help that begin to let go in a healthy way? We can create an illusion that the thing that's holding me is not going to impact me. It's not going to infect me. I don't care. These birds can ride around me on me all day long. But when I go to step a certain way or to sit down or someone leans against me, we're going to feel that burr, right? So while it might not be a constant problem, eventually it becomes a big problem, right? And so how then do we open to freedom and happiness together? Well, I got a couple answers, or things to explore in here. I was recently interviewed on a podcast that was really their niche is on grief work and wellness. And so I came in to speak about how I work with grief and how I invite the different clients that I work with to work with it. And the person thought that I had a really odd niche because they talked to therapists and psychologists and all these people who are in that side of the industry. And she thought it was interesting that I came in and I said, hey, I'm a wellness and spiritual coach and I work with grief work. And it intrigued her. And she was like, I wouldn't have expected a spiritual and wellness coach to have a niche working with grief work. And I do have a niche working with grief work, and I have a weird niche of even working in palliative care and end-of-life care and putting these things together. And again, this kind of intrigued her, and she was scratching her head and she's like, I would have thought you guys would have only been talking about like productivity and like all the good things and all the joy and all the happiness and how you can use your intuition to like get into different spidey senses and stuff like that. And so one of the first things that I helped share with her as we were in this interview is like, hey, if you're going to do, quote, wellness, and you're going to do spirituality, and you're going to do, quote, allowing myself to come into how much abundance of health and wellness and vitality can I have within this lifetime, you're going to be walking with grief. You're going to be walking and they shake hands and they go together. And that true freedom comes when we're willing to allow that grief work to be a part of us, right? And it's not about the idea of avoiding it or dressing it up in some pretty spiritual mumbo jumbo. It's about saying, hey, this is a part of life and I'm not going to be squeamish about it. I am going to look towards it. I'm not going to get grippy with it, and I'm not going to cling to different ways of being with letting go. And if you lean into this one a little bit as to why grief work is super important in any growth journey, really, it makes a lot of sense because we don't want to fully acknowledge that everything is impermanent, meaning that everything is in a constant state of change and nothing, no matter how much we love it or how much we like it, is going to stay the same no matter what, right? And we put these protective like shells around grief that says, oh, it only is supposed to happen at this time of my life. And when it happens, I can go into life is always changing. There's a season for everything, like these bombs that we put on ourselves to help us work with the grief. And so we skip through it super fast, in and out we go. And this then leaves some unhealed parts of us that haven't had a chance to fully process, quote unquote, to recognize the things that are getting grippy and to smooth them out so that the burr itself just drops off, right? And when that happens, what are all the sticky things from the burrs? Well, that is the unprocessed trauma. That is the fear. That is the grief that is being encapsulated over and over like a sand thing in an oyster that's keeping us from actually getting to that piece of sand that's in the middle, right? And then this weird thing happens. That grief then becomes a part of us and even a valued part of us. And so we get clingy with it and we don't allow ourselves to move fully in to processing that and releasing that and allowing our life to start anew. I always say there's a 6th stage of grief, and it's not just the bartering, the anger, the denial, the going back and forth with it and then eventually acceptance. It's like, or the sorrow work, there's creation. There's something new that is always wanting to come forward, and the question is, can we allow ourselves to work with that? And so where grief work comes in is it really helps to honor and release this hidden thing. And this is why I told her it's a part of the spiritual path, because once we start into wellness, once we start into healing, and we ask that question, how much abundance of all this beautiful vitality and wellness and balance within my system can I walk with, can I hold, and how can I then hold the parts of me that aren't, quote, getting in line with that? How then do I hold that in supportive, beautiful ways? Is that grief work allows us to honor both. It allows us to honor, hey, this part over here is working amazing. This part over here is maybe not what I would prefer to be experiencing right now. And how can I hold both? And if I can hold both, all of a sudden I'm not clinging to an image of what life should be. And grief work comes in interesting ways as we start to develop wellness and healing and allowing these tic-tacs, these kinks in the hose to release within us and connect more to more choice that we have in the present time, because all of a sudden we realize that the pain and the loss is not just what happened to us in that experience, it's also what didn't happen. The support that maybe didn't come in a helpful way. Maybe support came, but it came in a way that matched what somebody else thought we should be having. And so therefore our system felt marginalized, pushed to the side, or even wrong, because what we were feeling would be supportive to us, we were told that's not it, it's this over here. So that's a huge thing that is grief work. The other hidden way that grief comes into this is it's also in what couldn't be because of those experiences. So for example, if I had an experience where I lost a parent early on, it's that idea of a lifetime of what it would look like to be with that parent. So whether that loss is through a physical, like transition of death, or what maybe that's through them not being there because they were sick or they moved or divorced or whatever the heck that is, right? And all of a sudden, the life in which I could have had, the images, the ideas, the memories, the thoughts of what I would love, some part of me says this is the way it should be. That too is dissolved. And so it's all of those moments that we cling to, right? And so that needs to get processed. So like we go, oh, it wasn't that big a deal. I really love the way I have this relationship with my parent, and we're like, I'm good. And yet it's not going anywhere. It's not going anywhere because it's all these little burrs that say it could have been this way. And that it could have been or should have been, oh, that is such a huge place of unhealed process grief work that we have to dive into. And ultimately it goes out to our soul of as to like, WTF soul, is my life the way it is? And we come up with all these huge narratives to explain experiences, ways of being, ways of working with it, what did or did not happen to us, what support came or did not come. And again, we have a tendency to dress it up, put it in a nice little neat bow and say, it's all good. I'm just being present with right now. We've done this, but it's not letting go. And that's because truly it is also, it's a mix. It's a mix of what happened to us, and it's also a mix of what didn't happen to us. It's a mix of how help came or how help did not come. It's a mix of how we were taught to turn towards ourselves. Were we taught to turn towards ourselves with fear, or were we taught to turn towards ourselves with love? And healing work is about rewriting this whole story, coming in as that beautiful guardian parent, whatever you want to call it, mystical parent, and helping us realize that we can turn towards everything in our life, our hopes, our dreams, our passions, and the suffering, the iffy places, with love, right? And so this is a huge part of hidden things that's in this freedom that really is what happens when parts of us cling to their wounds. And so the other really significant hidden thing as to why we cling is that parts of us, especially the young, wounded parts of us, they have a target of who and how they want that help to come to them. So you come in there now with this beautiful open heart of this sacred witness of saying, I see you, I hear you, share with me your pain, take my hand and let's dissolve these little things and let's slide this burr out of our system, right? And it says, yeah, absolutely. I'll let you see me. I'll let you understand me. And we go to do that last little part of sliding out and saying, come home to me now. And it says, no, thank you. And we kind of get confused and we could feel a little release of the tension. We feel a release of the sadness. And then next thing you know, you feel like you're back in Groundhog Day where it's all back. and it's all built itself back up again. And whatever little release or unburdening you had in your system, it didn't hold, you didn't fully uncling itself, and therefore we're not truly free. And people say to me, well, I must have not done the meditation correctly, or I must not do my healing work, or I thought I healed this, but dang, it's back, And the hidden piece that most of it is that the target of what that person, that part of ourselves wants, is not available to us. So that young part really wants whoever associated with the original attachment wound not being seen, felt, heard, attuned to, their stuff creating harm within our system. The target of who they really want that repair to come from is from them. And so us coming in there, they're saying, yeah, that's beautiful, that's amazing, but I need this person to grant me my freedom. I need this person to see that they caused this pain and apologize and undo it. And when that happens, it really is a supportive way to let that little part know it's going to come from us, right? And lovingly sitting with it as it builds a relationship with you, because it doesn't have a relationship with any part of you because it's been asleep. It's been a little burr riding along, but not aware of the process of time or even who you are in this moment. And so when that happens, it's really helping clients establish a trusted relationship with themselves, and so that the parts of them, when they come towards them, they realize it's a different level of quality, of connection, of presence that's being offered to them. And it can help them really release that pain that happened to them. It can accept that this is now a real offer, and it can let go of the target that it has, that it thinks the only way to heal, it's got to come through them. And it brings it back to ourselves. Again, more choice, more freedom. And it like all of a sudden slides out, right? And so this is what Thich Nhat Hanh is talking about when he says when we cling. When we cling to things, whether it's an emotion, a thought, or a possession, or even a target of who we think or how we think that healing or that connection or that enlightenment, quote unquote, is going to come from, when we do that, that action creates the exact opposite of freedom and empowerment. It creates leaks within us. It creates hemorrhaging. It creates sticky wicky like kinks in the hose and stagnant energy that cannot move, and it's festering, and it's just, ugh, it's having a whole moment. And all of that creates an immense drag on our system. This is where we get fatigue. This is where we get bloating issues. This is where we get digestive issues. This is where we get rhythmic issues in our electrical system. This is where we get tension headaches and inflammation, and all these crazy things start happening in our system because it's just compounding on itself. And so that brings me to the second quote. I think actually this is probably like 3 or 4 quotes in for this episode, but we're just gonna roll with it because I tried to break this thing apart and it always wanted to come back together. So I don't fight. I go with the flow. And so it's also by Thich Nhat Hanh, and he says, and I'm gonna give it to you the way that he said it, and then we're gonna adapt it to talk about these ourselves as different parts of ourselves, and how do we turn towards that which the emotions are the messengers for. And so he said, when another person, i.e. part of yourself, makes you suffer, it is because he suffers deeply within himself, and his suffering is overspilling. He does not need punishment, he needs help. That's the message he's sending. So again, we can work with this on the outside world of having compassion for other people and all that other stuff. And if you're listening to this podcast, I'm not too worried about you taking care of that other side. You're probably very compassionate with everybody around you. So that's not the target that I got to worry about with my clients. It's more about how we work with ourselves, right? And so if we can change this quote around just a little bit and lean in without getting squeamish, right? When another part of me makes a different part of me suffer, right? I don't know why I ate that. I know better. I know my body does not like that type of thing. Like for me, maybe it's wheat or caffeine or something like that. Like I know my system, and yet why did I do that? Why did I go do that? Why did I procrastinate for 3 days when I knew this was here? Why do I do that? Some part of me is making another part of me suffer, right? When that happens, it's because that other part is deeply suffering within itself. And that suffering is spilling over. The only way it knows how is to say, see the pain that I'm in. This is that old saying, hurt people hurt people. Well, why do they do that? Because some part of them is screaming, I'm hurt, right? And it's spilling over to try to be seen, felt, and heard and released, right? Tended to. And it's spilling over to the rest of you. So it's causing this flooding effect, this desert energy in some places and oversaturation in others. And when that happens, we don't need to tell this part how horrible it is. We can give it insight like, hey, do you realize that this is creating quite an issue? We can do that. And yet, we don't want to punish it. It needs what I call the guardians of the heart. It needs that loving sacred witness energy. It needs support to help it release why it's doing what it's doing and open up to a new way of being. And so when I show up and I'm clinging to an emotion or a thought or a belief or an experience from the past, it's because that part of me that has that wheel that's grippy has taken over. And that's a past part of me that is deeply, deeply suffering. There is grief, there is loss, there is fear, there is isolation, there's mistrust that any help can come to it in a helpful way, right? And if we have a practice or a habit of clinging to those parts, right, and expecting us, what happens is that that part actually expects us to come to it with a punishment. That part actually expects us to come to it with, as you heard me say, hands on hip, furrowed brow, wagging a finger at it, telling it it's wrong, judging it. One of my clients says, wire brushing it, like we're coming at it with a self-rejection, self-loathing, self-hate, trying to browbeat that thing into not doing whatever the heck it's doing. Right? And when that part believes that punishment is going to come towards it, why the heck would it talk? Why would it be willing to share what's really up with it? No, it's going to be stubborn. It's going to have an attitude. It's going to be what I call the hoodie kid, where it puts the hoodie on and it puts his earphones in and says, I can't hear you. Like it's going to be the one. It's going to cop. Or it's going to just submit and appease us. Oh, yeah. So sorry. Yeah, I won't do that again. But it will, right? And it will. Why? Because it's still holding his pain, right? And so step 2 involves this belief system that says, hey, I'm not going to punish myself when I realize there's a part of me that has a need. I'm not going to punish myself when a part of me acts out inappropriately. Instead, I want to turn towards that with love, with the beautiful guardians of my heart, of saying, what choices are available to us? Help me understand all these different things, right? And then therefore, our system begins to build faith that we're not going to get wapowed, it's actually going to get tend towards love. So this brings me into the beautiful question is when we punish ourselves, right? When we cling, we end up with a very messy version of letting go and clinging. We end up with an all fake illusionary process, but in reality, we're still full of burrs. And when we sit down, we feel them, or we walk in our thing, we feel them, or we try to reach those things, cling to us and pull our little arms back and say no, you can't move. So what are all these different ways that we cling? There's so many different ways. There's avoidance, being busy. These are trauma responses. This is busyness. This is overworking. This is procrastination. This is addictive behaviors to all types of things, not just substances, right? That get us to avoid, to step out of the conversation because we don't think we can have the conversation in a helpful way, right? Otherwise, we'd be doing it. So our system doesn't believe there's enough quote unquote capacity of self on board for us to turn towards ourselves without furrow brows, hands on hips, or self-loathing and rejection. So it has us avoid because it says, I don't want to create more pain. Like the way you're going to turn towards me is going to create more wounding, more pain. So let's just get out of Dodge. Step one. There's the one that I call the tactic of diminishing the pain that is present. And so what does this mean? Diminishing the pain that is present. This is marginalizing our emotions or the messengers or the hurt part of ourselves and saying, it's not that bad. It's not as bad or a big of a deal as so-and-so or what this person's going through. We're going to talk about this a lot in the coming episodes of messy versions of gratitude, right? Like where we're like, oh, I'm grateful for that because it could be worse, right? And when we do that, basically we're subtly shaming that part of ourselves for the need that it has. And we're telling it it's not that big of a deal, right? We have all been told that when we are having a moment of crisis within ourselves and we're told, oh, it's not that big of a deal because you could be doing this, this, and this. Okay, now I feel shame for even having the need in the first place. So this diminishing a pain protector mechanism is a problematic and definitely something, if you've got that one, if that sounds familiar, we could send some love to and start softening our grip on that. That's a helpful way of working with our system. The third other main way in which we cling is exploiting that wound or inflaming it. So what do I mean by that? This is aggrandizing the wound. This is what, if you ever listen to Carolyn Mace, she calls this woundology. And that's basically, that says my wound, because I have this wound, you can't hurt me anymore. I've already got this wound. It's already open. It's already bleeding out. And this wound is actually going to protect me. So if I hold on to this wound, I gain a sense of protection and maybe even a shadowy way of feeling like I'm empowered. So this wound gets me passage to not be asked to do something. This wound gets me passage to make people back off if they come to me with their need. They can't bring their need to me because I'm already working over here, right? And so this is a very common, quote, tactic in our system. Because why? Because when we are overwhelmed by something, people do back off, right? When our system is saturated and it can't work with something else, people do step back and say, oh, my bad, I can't help you. So if our system doesn't feel like we can work with the problem that we have, it's definitely not going to feel like it wants to work with anybody else's problem. It's just going to make it go further and further and further out of balance. And so therefore, this one comes in, woundology becomes a very appropriate way. We're trending towards this one right now, just collectively, right? Because everybody's got wounds. Everybody, in my opinion, we're a collective of a traumatized nervous system. We're a collective of diminishing the pain and avoidance and exploiting. And these are the three things that are happening just all across the board. And it's the unfortunate human condition. And these are the conditions that doing this work, that's why this work is so not selfish, it's so needed, when we can bring these in and we can see them and we can say, okay, I'm not going to punish myself for doing this, but I definitely know if I stay doing it this way, this is not going to help me. And so how can I give myself some grace? And how then maybe can I bring a little bit of grace to the person next to me? And how can I start to move through love and compassion instead of fear of I'm either going to create more suffering or I'm going to be more suffering within myself. It's a lose-lose situation no matter what I do. So let's just go hands off, right? We come through a different doorway, and that's what Thich Nhat Hanh was inviting us into, is to remembering there is a doorway for freedom, which is the only component for happiness. That's it. And once we realize this, we realize that we can seek connection in a healthy way that's not trying to exaggerate something or to punish something. We can, again, find that middle road. We can come at step 2 with a beginner's point of view of real curiosity that says, hey, I might not know how to best help you, but I know you do. And I know that part of me has within it that knowledge, that wisdom, that medicine within that soul. And if I can ungrip myself from my mental being thinking it knows what it needs, and instead I open to my heart, the wound is going to speak through me in my heart, and it's just going to start to loosen itself up so it can slide away and let go of the pain, let go of the burden, let go of the overwhelm, and come home, come back into balance and stillness. And then we're both letting go at the same time, the peace and us, right? It really is, can happen. It's not magic, woo woo. It's a real thing, right? And so, what are some of the heart led questions that get us in through that doorway? It could be something like, share with me. Share with me right now. What is happening within you right now? Help me understand. What are your worries? What are your fears? If I change the way I'm working, if I don't eat that thing, or if I don't, avoid what I'm doing right now and I turn towards that task, what do you think is going to happen? And I'm not going to poo poo it and tell it it's silly and stupid for doing that. Like, no, I really want to understand. Show me, tell me what is happening right now to this part of me. And then invite it to share with you. What do you need? What would be helpful for you right now? And let it realize that there is this beautiful resource within you. There are the parts of you that are not afraid. There are parts of you that absolutely feel a sense of courage or empowerment. There are parts of you that are like, hey, we can break this down. We can sort this out. We can put the different puzzle pieces on the table and see what we need to work with and how that is. There are all these parts of you that this part has no idea about, and we can start to bring them to them. And so, just like a compassionate parent or even a compassionate medical professional really doesn't just get in there and start saying, this is what to do, this is what you need, this is what's wrong, this is how you need to, like, no, like that just feels like, okay, I'm just a machine and you're going to twerk me and then put me back out, right? That's not helpful. That does not feel good. Instead, there is this moment of it starts with the listening. It starts with the observing. It starts with curiosity and inviting that part of me. Once that connection is on board and it's there, it naturally starts to keep folding in, and we start to brainstorm. We start to come up with ideas that when we allow ourselves to hold ourselves this way, we have loving boundaries, right? So I always liked to like the image of like my daughter when she would have like a moment, or if it's too hard to hold in the human world, imagine that there's a really scared animal sitting in front of you, because that's basically what these parts of us are. They are afraid, neglected, abused. Like they don't know that the help that's coming to them is coming from a kind and soft place. It's funny. The cat just came in. He's like, "Hey, I'll be here. I'll help you like put this forward." So I got a little distracted. Sorry. And but like him, when he came to us, he was so emotionally shut down because he had been sitting in this little cube in this little shelter for a year. And so he didn't even look up. Like when people would come by and look at them, and we went and looked at like a couple times because I really wanted to make sure like this is the cat that was wanting to be a part of ours. And like I kept feeling this is it. And yet he would never engage. And so I just started meeting him in the energetics, and I just started saying, hey, I would love to get to know you a little bit better. Something about your soul and our family unit is calling to each other. So share with me. And in those meditations, it became more and more willing. And when we went in and I was like, okay, we'll check the box, we'll do like the thing, like they opened the cage and he didn't even look up. And then I just sat and I breathed and I said, hey, do you remember this heart? I've been talking to you for a couple weeks now, just sitting with you, not asking you for anything. It's me. And he picked up his little head and he literally jumped out of the thing. The person was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, no, he's good. And he just like nestled into my heart center and started purring. It was gonna make me cry. And was so like, that is what I want. That is the type of presence we want to bring to these parts of ourselves. And it came through me saying, wow, it must be really hard to be sitting here watching other cats come and go, watching people pick them up, watching people tend to them, and yet you stay. And the reason why he was staying is not because he's not amazing, is that he had a lot of health issues. And so he had like digestive issues and this, that, and the other, and all these teeth pulled. And so he was a high maintenance kitty. But he's not high maintenance kitty anymore. All those digestive issues have gone away. All those different ways in which his system was saying, I'm out of balance, now that he's in this supportive environment, no longer need to be there. And that's what can happen when we allow ourselves to move towards ourselves with love versus judging ourselves for the pain, the words of anger, the hurt, shoving away. We start to be able to do the things that we need to do to be seen, felt, and heard, right? And allowing that to come in. And so as we go into Thich Nhat Hanh's, both of his quotes, we are willing to become that inner healer. We're willing to become that cosmic parent. We're willing to have parts of ourselves feel safe to turn towards us, to leap and come and say, yes, thank you so much. I see you, I hear you, I want to be with you, and I want to share those things. And when we do that, then we can allow ourselves to remember that it's not about perfection. It's not about running around and finding all these birds. It's about allowing the one that's ready to be seen, felt, and heard to come to us, right? Otherwise, we're going to them and we're trying to pull them off and they're not ready. Our system doesn't want them. It doesn't want to stay balanced. These pieces don't want to stay lost. They don't want to stay doing whatever they had to do for survival, a trauma adaptation. They went away from their original heart and working to do what they're doing. They want to come back. They want to release the pain. They don't want to hold it. That's what cut them off first, right? And so it's about allowing that presence to be seen, felt, and heard so that the system says, I'm coming to you, right? And this is the huge shift that clients feel when they begin working with me, because instead of me walking through a checklist, your system needs to do this, then it needs to do this, and it should do this, and it should do that. Normally I can't snap. I'm really impressed with myself right now. Um, that was like good channeling for whatever's coming through for this one, is with that snap, 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 right? Like, no, instead, that's clinging. What it's clinging to is my mind and my ego thinking it knows what's best. And instead, what we want to open to is that entry point of connection from our soul. And so that's what the practices are for this week, is inviting you to start to open to what would it feel like if I pass the baton from my mind, trying to figure it out so much, and open to the idea that it is through love, through compassion, through learning how to cultivate this presence within myself, which we've been working on for 21 episodes, that when I can do that, that is the environment, that is the presence that allows me to move from love, and even within my own system, shift from self-punishment to self-love, support, healing, and ultimately the freedom to be in happiness, joy, enjoyment, creating the life, living the life, taking the healthy risks to be in the life that I want and to go for my dreams and all those other amazing things, right? But it all starts with this little doorway. So if it feels good, just take a moment, take a nice, beautiful, deep breath in, and out. Invite the Reiki energy that is you. Reiki is just the Japanese word for life force energy. What is life force energy? It is love. What is love? Love is not conditional. It's available, present, and in constant flow that believes you are worthy. Full stop. You don't have to earn it. You don't have to do anything with it. It can let it be. So just recognize that that exists within you. And we're asking that energy from within you to start to awaken, to strengthen its connection through that heart space to whatever level feels good for you, through your whole body being out into your aura, filling up this beautiful orb of Reiki energy to help hold you and your system as we explore its current relationship with how it clings to emotions to thoughts to beliefs to wounds. Doesn't matter because it's all the same thing. And how it believes that those approaches of whatever it's clinging to is the best way to keep you safe and protected. And what if there was another way? That's step one. That's all we're asking it to do, is to consider, what if there was another way? And that when we sit in these beautiful self-work practices, or we're walking, or we're letting them listen as we're washing dishes or doing different things, as we allow ourselves to start to be in this self-dialogue, what we're seeking in this dialogue is just information, understanding, awareness. We're not trying to judge the system. We're here to really seek, show me, tell me, help me understand. And from that, we can then step into what is the change that the system knows best, would best support you right now in having a little bit more balance, a little bit more trust, and a little bit more willingness to begin to let go, to become free, to become happy. So let's go first through just noticing your physical body. What is happening in and around your body with this invitation? Because our body, our whole system is very dynamic. It literally changes depending on the invitation that we are asking it to engage in. And so we just ask it to engage in this, what if this is possible? To let go of the ways we're clinging, whatever that is, to what creates safety and security, and open up to maybe a healthier, more appropriate, more present time way of meeting our needs. And with just that invitation, what is happening in and around your body? And just notice it. We're not going to write a big story with it or anything else like that. As it clings to its experiences, emotions, and other protective mechanisms. So maybe you're noticing a tight jaw, like a clenching, I gotta hold on, or a jetting jaw, like jetting forward, that's like getting ready to like absorb a punch. Maybe you're noticing that your whole system is moving forward, like it's got to push itself into the wind in order to brace itself. Maybe it's contracting, moving away, collapsing down. Maybe the one that always catches clients off guard is I say, what are your feet up to? And they notice that their feet, their toes are clutching, or they're like, their whole foot's trying to pull away from the surface that it's in. And it's like doing weird things and turning in on itself and like avoiding itself, or it's rocking forward with all of its weights on its toes like a sprinter ready to like get out of the gate and get moving. And so in true somatic work, we're not going to tell it that what it's doing is wrong, but we're just going to make a note of it. And if it wants to wiggle, wiggle and just say, thanks, message received, and it can relax it, great. If not, we'll accept whatever it's at. Also in somatic work, it doesn't have to match. So you can have a part of you that's opening and being like, yes, I have been waiting for this invitation. And you could have a part of you that's doing the complete opposite. And it's totally okay because we don't match. That's like myth number one in work, is like that we're only one thing. No, we're not. We're like a zillion, a million different things. And so it's okay if it doesn't match. Just simply write it down. And then we want to sort it. So we ask it, bring our attention to the first one. Maybe you have 5 different things, 20 different things, 50 different things on this list. Who knows how long you had me paused while you did this, And we're going to ask it, soft eye, bring forward the place that it would feel the most supportive to start. And so you might be thinking, oh, I want to go after the big gun. This is something that I've been plagued with my whole life. And instead it says, let's work on your big thumb. Who the heck knows what it's going to say? And you're going to just trust it. You would then bring your attention to that place that it called forward, and you're going to now ask it, share some more with me. What else is there? Like, are there descriptive words for that sensation? Does it have an image or a color? Or does it have an emotion attached to it? If it had a thought bubble above it, what would fill in that thought bubble to share you more about it? It might be words. It might be a flash of a moment in time. like you're watching a little excerpt. Just what do you notice in that thought bubble? And just think it. And now we want to open to the heart. So we've talked to the body, we've talked to the mind. Now we're going to ask those conversations to step back just a hair and open to that heart energy. How do parts of you feel towards that which is clinging? This idea that says, "Oh, no, I gotta stay this way," right? Like, and this is where we want to get kind of the good, the bad, the ugly. You might have a part of you that says, "Ugh, why do we keep doing this?" And then just ask it if it can step back and let you continue to work with it. We don't want to punish it. Most of the time, things will step back naturally, and then you'll be left with this felt sense coming forward from the heart. We're looking to see if we feel compassion towards that. Does it want to understand more? Does it want to invite it to share what is the medicine held within it? Or is it seeking to punish it, judge it, and tell it it's wrong? If you have a part that's trying to seek punishment and tell it it's wrong, go back to step one and repeat until you get to the place where that heart feels like it's there, right? Huh. And so once that heart energy is present and you can feel a true willingness in your system, again, it doesn't have to be perfect, just 51%. We got to get over the threshold of more willingness. Then we're going to open up to what does the soul, this part of you that's not all enmeshed and entangled and it has a little bit more perspective, a little bit more space. What does it want you to begin to dialogue with, this part of you that you have brought forward, so that it can begin to soften its attachment to you? Right? You've already said, I'm willing to start to let this go and open your hand, but now we're talking to how attached this other piece is to you. It's clinging on for dear life. And your soul is going to help you start to be able to build that trust that it can then come beside it, right? This is where you might see options like, you know what? This is something I really want to bring into a space with a skilled practitioner or a trusted friend. This is something that I really want to journal about, or I need to go for a walk. This is a part of me that really does feel this, that, and the other. And I want to do some expressive writing about that or automatic writing. Your system will share with you something that's available to it right now that would actually be helpful. If you get back a pie in the sky thing that requires you to have an influx of time, of resources, or of like money, that's way outside of what is compatible for you to do in the quote unquote near future, you're not talking to your soul. You're talking to a mental being protector. And that's a huge piece, right? And we're doing this work. And this is where working with like a skilled practitioner like myself or somebody else can really help you start to sort where these quote soul-like parts are and where they're not, right? Because our system will never bring us guidance that we actually can't do. It won't. It won't ever overface us. It might require us to rearrange some stuff for sure, but it will always be doable. And so just feel into that. What does the soul like you to bring forward to help support this part of you and just starting to release this clinging? And so, in the interest of time, I'm going to keep going, but feel free to stay in that meditation as long as possible. I always like to end my active meditations with a thanking of my system's willingness to take that leap of faith, to trust that I was going to come and lean in and take a good look from that place of love instead of coming in with a stick. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm so grateful to whichever way it talked to me, whether it was a small little whisper or a whole book. I'm so grateful to it. And I want to let it know that. And then I also remind myself, I'm grateful to me. I'm grateful for my willingness to put this partnership, this willingness to set myself free on the front burner and to have this as part of the way in which I want to live. And I have to make that choice. And not only do I have to make that choice, I have to keep making that choice. And so, yeah, high five yourself and be like, this is amazing. I am showing up for myself, and claim that, because we have protectors that don't let us claim and cheerlead ourselves. And so we want to have that healthy cheerleader in there, right? And so the practice this week that can continue to help you grow your awareness of the different habits that are in your system that are clingy or grippy or whatever you want to call it is to really get curious about what that might be about. What are their fears that are holding them on as you're trying to like shake them off and be like, it's not going anywhere, right? It's like, what is that? And so this week, I set that intention to notice when I have a part of me clinging to an emotion, a thought, a belief, or experience in a way that is causing me to really lose the freedom of choice. How would I truly want to show up right now in this moment if I didn't have that quote block associated with me, right? And so I invite Reiki energy to guide my awareness as I move throughout this week. Just setting this intention right now. To be aware of moments of things like avoidance, self-judgment. These are the three things, the diminishing, right? And then the justifications, the woundology. Help me be aware of the big three. That usually something falls underneath one of those three categories. Just bring my awareness to it. These are clues of the behaviors of the messengers that are a part of me that are suffering in some form or fashion. And I want them to feel that I am choosing to not marginalize my system or plow through my system or get bogged down by it. I'm choosing health and wellness. I'm choosing freedom. I'm choosing happiness. And I ask in those moments of awareness to help engage in the flow of choices that can allow me to turn towards that which wants to let go. Because I truly believe it wants to let go. Just as much as we're trying to shake it off and pull it out, it too wants to let go. It just doesn't know it's possible, right? So help me begin to notice where those opportunities are so that I can have the freedom to turn towards my system with love, to tend to my needs and wishes in beautiful, healthy ways. I open to the soul medicines of freedom, love, compassion. Feel that. Freedom, love, compassion. And guide me this week. Set that intention right now. Allow me to gain more comfort with choice and happiness. And so it is. Peace, peace, peace. Deep breath in, out, wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Resets the vagal nerve. It's a process in there. But again, I really offer soulful practices through the doorway of that step one and step two of change is always going to be awareness and compassionate acceptance, and the action and the accountability will come from that. It just naturally, organically comes forward, right? And so that is the process of really connecting and living and leading your beautiful soul-led life, right? And like Thich Nhat Hanh said, that is the only condition for happiness. It's the core component for freedom, is that ability to not only make the choice to say, I want to let go, but to help our system, these parts that are scared, nervous, or help them feel safe to let go of the grippiness so that we can come to balance, so that we can come to center, so that we can come home to healing, right? And it all starts with awareness. It's huge. This is the step. Everyone says, well, I want to get to these bigger, high level things. I'm like, it's all here. This is it. It just feels bigger and more expansive, the quote unquote more you go deeper into the system, but this is the core. So I really hope that this is helpful for you in establishing that willingness to be in these first stages, knowing that these stages are what bring action, what bring accountability, what bring growth and expansion forward to us. And it creates that wedge of awareness that we can then really walk into, of letting go in healthy, beautiful ways, allowing our system to feel safe to let go as well. And then we move into freedom, and freedom is happiness. Offering you light, love, and joy on your journey. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for listening to Soulful Practices. For more information on how to work directly with me or one of my guests, check out the show notes below. We'd love for you to also let us know what parts of this episode are speaking to you and how this practice is supporting you on your healing and spiritual journey. Please share this podcast with fellow seekers, travelers. Together, we can create a wave of soul-led beings in this world, offering you light, love, and joy on your journey. Michelle Holling-Brooks. Until next time.